If you think freedom is everything, wait till you meet the men who would kill to stay behind bars. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice. Rain lashed against the cracked windows of Redwater Penitentiary, a gray fortress on the edge of Michigan's forgotten farmlands. The thunder rolled over the razor wire fences like a warning. Inside, the guards whispered about a man who vanished from a place no one could escape. His name was Ethan Cole, inmate number 74329. Convicted of armed robbery and manslaughter, Cole had spent 16 years inside Redwater. Everyone said he was different, quiet, precise, almost too calm for a man serving life without parole. He didn't pick fights, didn't gamble, didn't even talk much. But when his sentence was suddenly commuted after a DNA review cleared him of the killing, something strange happened. Ethan Cole refused to leave. "Freedom," he said to the warden that morning, staring through the reinforced glass of the visitation room. "You think I'm ready for that?" 2 weeks later, on the night he was to be transferred to a halfway house, Cole disappeared, vanished from a cell locked from the outside. Cameras went dark at exactly 2:37 a.m. The guards on duty swore they didn't see or hear a thing. When dawn broke, the entire prison went into lockdown. Detective Laura Meyers, from the Michigan Bureau of Investigation, was called in. A veteran of 20 years, she'd seen escape attempts before, but never one like this. No tunnel, no weapons, no accomplices. Just an empty bunk and a folded uniform neatly placed on top. "He didn't break out," Meyers muttered as she examined the spotless cell. "He walked out." Her partner, Detective Sam Porter, raised an eyebrow. "You're saying someone let him go?" "I'm saying he didn't leave alone." In the days that followed, every inch of Redwater was searched. No traces. No footprints in the mud. No sign of forced entry. But then came the first clue, an envelope found in the prison chapel. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a line written in shaky handwriting. "Freedom isn't real if you can't forget what you've done." Meyers stared at the note, her pulse quickening. "This isn't a message," she whispered. "It's a confession." She ordered background checks on everyone Cole had contact with, the guards, his cellmate, even the prison chaplain. That's when she noticed a disturbing pattern. 3 other inmates, all long-timers with commuted sentences, had also vanished in the past 6 months. Each had refused release before disappearing days later. "Someone's cleaning house," Porter said grimly. "Or," Meyers countered, "someone's protecting them from something worse outside." The investigation took them deep into Redwater's archives, old files buried under decades of dust. There they found references to an experimental rehabilitation program run 15 years earlier, codenamed Project Horizon. It was meant to help lifers adjust to freedom through intense psychological conditioning. The project had been abruptly shut down after several participants took their own lives shortly after release. Cole had been one of the last to undergo the program. Meyers tracked down Dr. Alan Graves, the psychologist who ran Horizon, now retired and living alone near Lake Huron. His house was lined with old case files and faded photographs of inmates smiling stiffly in therapy sessions. "I warned them," Graves said, his voice trembling. "You can't erase guilt. You can only bury it. But when you set those men free, you dig it all up again." He handed Meyers a photograph, a group of 6 inmates, Cole among them, standing in a circle during one of Horizon's final sessions. On the back was a date, March 3, 2010, and a signature, EC. Cole's initials. "What happened to the others?" Meyers asked. Graves hesitated. "Most of them didn't make it more than a year on the outside. One went missing in Ohio. Another turned himself back in for a crime he didn't commit. They said the world felt wrong, too loud, too fast. Like they were still trapped. Only now, the cage was invisible." That night, Meyers couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the case files in her mind, the identical disappearances, the strange refusal to leave, the haunting words on the note. What if these men hadn't escaped at all? What if they were being taken? By who and why remained a mystery. 3 nights later, A maintenance worker at Redwater reported hearing strange noises behind the old psychiatric wing, a section of the prison abandoned since 2012. When Meyers and Porter arrived, the hallways smelled of mildew and rust. Water dripped from broken pipes. Their flashlights cut through the dark, revealing graffiti on the peeling walls, scratched words that repeated over and over. Better inside. Better inside. Better inside. They reached the final door, marked Ward D. It was bolted shut. Behind it, faint footsteps echoed. Police. Meyers shouted. If you're in there, come out slowly. No answer. Only breathing. Porter kicked the door open. The beam of his flashlight swept across the room and froze. There, sitting on the floor, was Ethan Cole. He looked thinner, paler, eyes hollow but strangely calm. Around him were 3 other men, all wearing Redwater uniforms, their prison IDs faded but readable. The missing inmates. Cole looked up at Meyers and said softly, "You shouldn't have come here." Before Meyers could reply, she noticed something carved into the concrete wall behind him. Words etched deep, as if done over years. "We don't want to be free." But as she took a step closer, something caught her eye. A 5th bed, still warm, and a folded uniform lying on it. The tag read, Officer Daniel H. Porter. She turned, but her partner was gone. If you thought Chapter 1 was twisted, wait till you see how deep this goes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your theories below, because this case is about to take a turn no one saw coming. Detective Laura Meyers stood frozen in the flickering beam of her flashlight. The words on the wall, "We don't want to be free," echoed in her mind, but her focus was locked on the empty space where her partner had just stood. A second ago, Sam Porter had been beside her. Now, only his radio remained, crackling with static on the floor. "Porter," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The silence that followed wasn't just empty, it was wrong. Ethan Cole and the 3 other inmates didn't move. Their expressions were blank, mechanical, as if they were waiting for something. Meyers raised her gun, her instinct screaming, "Where is he? What did you do to my partner?" Cole tilted his head slowly. "He saw it," he murmured. "Once you see it, you can't go back." "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer. The other inmates began to hum, low and monotone, the same few notes repeating endlessly. It sounded like a hymn twisted out of key. Then the power went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Meyers lunged for the door, fumbling with her flashlight, her heart pounding. When the beam flicked back on, the men were gone. Every single one. The only thing left behind was Porter's badge, smeared with fresh dirt. By sunrise, the entire Redwater complex was in chaos again. Meyers ordered a full sweep of the abandoned wing, but there were no signs of the inmates or her partner. Security footage from the past 12 hours had been erased. Not corrupted, manually deleted. Captain Rollins, head of Redwater Security, was furious. "You're telling me 4 inmates and 1 officer just disappeared from a locked, sealed block?" Meyers met his glare. "I'm telling you this isn't an escape. It's a pattern. Someone's orchestrating this from inside." That theory didn't sit well with the higher-ups. Within hours, the warden placed her on administrative pause, effectively pulling her from the investigation. But Meyers wasn't about to walk away. She'd lost her partner, and she wasn't about to let Redwater bury another secret. That evening, she drove to Porter's apartment. The place looked undisturbed, coffee mug on the counter, TV remote still on the couch. But when she checked his desk, she found something odd, a thin brown envelope labeled Horizon Unredacted. Inside were photocopies of classified documents, psychological reports from Project Horizon that had never been released publicly. Porter must have gotten them before the case reopened. Each file listed inmate names, therapy session notes, and one consistent pattern in their evaluations. Subject displays anxiety about reintegration. Persistent fear of external reality. Recommends continued environmental confinement. At the bottom of every report was the same signature. Dr. Alan Graves. Meyers drove back to Lake Huron that night. The storm from the week before had returned, angry winds and endless rain pounding against her windshield. By the time she reached Graves' cabin, her hands were shaking from more than just cold. She found him at his desk, a fire burning low beside a stack of old cassette tapes. His face was pale, eyes hollow. "I told you to leave it alone," he whispered. "Porter's gone," Meyers shot back. "And so are 4 inmates who should have been dead years ago. Tell me what Project Horizon really was." Graves hesitated, then picked up a tape labeled Session 18 EC. He slid it into a dusty recorder. Static filled the air, followed by a man's voice. "Ethan Cole. I can't go out there, Doc. It's not real. They keep telling me I'm free, but every time I close my eyes, I'm back here. The walls feel safer. The silence makes sense." Then another voice, Graves' own. "Freedom isn't about where you are, Ethan. It's about what you can live with." Cole laughed bitterly. "Then I'll stay where I can live." The tape clicked off. Graves exhaled shakily. "We didn't rehabilitate them, Detective. We reconditioned them. Broke their minds so completely that freedom became the enemy." "You what?" "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said, his hands trembling. "But after the funding dried up, the warden kept the program running, underground. They believed that men who couldn't adjust were a liability to society. So they were given a choice: stay inside voluntarily or disappear." Meyers stepped back, sick to her stomach. "You're telling me Redwater's been running an off-the-books containment program, using inmates as lab rats?" Graves didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the window. Outside, faint headlights cut through the fog, a black van pulling up the dirt road. "They've found me," he whispered. Before Meyers could react, the front door burst open. 2 men in prison tactical gear stormed in. One grabbed the tapes from the desk, the other shoved Graves against the wall. "MBI!" Meyers yelled, flashing her badge, but the taller man swung a rifle toward her. "This isn't your jurisdiction anymore," he said calmly. "Walk away." For a moment, no one moved. Then, a gunshot shattered the silence. The taller man fell, clutching his leg. Graves had fired an old revolver from his desk drawer. The other man retaliated instantly, one shot, straight to the chest. Graves crumpled. Meyers ducked behind the couch and fired 2 rounds of her own, hitting the remaining intruder in the arm. He fled through the back door, vanishing into the woods. When the smoke cleared, Graves was lying in a pool of blood, gasping. He reached out, pressing something into Myers's hand, a small cassette labeled Final Session DHP. "Who's DHP?" she asked urgently. Graves' voice faded. "Your partner, Daniel Henry Porter." Then his hand went limp. Meyers sat in her car for nearly an hour before she dared play the tape. Porter's voice came through clearly, shaky, confused. "They told me the walls were talking. That I'd understand once I stayed long enough. I didn't believe them until I heard Ethan's voice last night. He said the walls remember us, Laura. He said they decide who leaves." The tape ended with a sound of heavy breathing, then a whisper. "If you hear this, don't come back to Redwater." Meyers dropped the tape, her heart in her throat. But when she looked up through the rain-streaked windshield, she froze. There, standing on the empty highway under the storm, was Sam Porter, drenched, motionless, staring straight at her car. His prison uniform was soaked through, and on his chest his badge was gone. If you've made it this far, you're already in too deep. Hit that subscribe button because this final chapter will change everything you thought you knew about freedom, guilt, and the walls that never really let you go. For a long, breathless moment, Detective Laura Meyers couldn't move. The rain pounded harder against the windshield, distorting the figure standing in front of her headlights, Sam Porter. Her partner. Or what was left of him. His eyes looked vacant, almost hollow. Water streamed down his face, but he didn't blink. He didn't react. He just stared. "Sam," she whispered, opening her car door slowly. "It's me." No answer. She stepped into the rain, her shoes sinking into the mud. "What happened to you?" He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to recognize her. Then, in a voice stripped of emotion, he said, "You shouldn't have come back." Before she could speak again, he turned and began walking, away from the road, toward the forest beyond the prison grounds. Meyers followed, her flashlight beam cutting through sheets of rain. Sam, stop. But he didn't stop. He moved deeper into the woods, silent, determined. The ground sloped downward toward an old drainage tunnel that hadn't been used in decades. She could barely make out the faint outline of Redwater's walls in the distance, dark, looming shapes against the stormy sky. When he reached the tunnel entrance, Porter finally stopped. "They said I'd be free if I went back," he murmured, voice trembling. "But the truth is, you never leave. You just carry the walls with you. Sam, listen to me, whatever they did, we can fix it. We can expose this. You're not." He turned sharply, his face pale under the flashlight's glow. "You don't get it, Laura. They let us out to make room for more." A chill ran through her spine. "Who's they?" But before he could answer, a low metallic groan echoed through the tunnel, followed by the flicker of light deep inside. Voices. Someone was down there. Meyers drew her gun and slowly approached. "Sam, stay behind me." But when she turned, he was gone again. The tunnel stretched endlessly, damp air thick with the smell of rust and decay. Her flashlight flickered as she moved, illuminating faint markings along the walls, numbers, dates, initials. Hundreds of them. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold. A door, steel, bolted, identical to the ones inside Redwater Penitentiary. Only this wasn't inside the prison. It was beneath it. Etched above the door were 3 words. Project Horizon. Continued access only. Her hands trembled as she pushed it open. What she saw inside didn't look like a prison cell. It looked like a laboratory. Dozens of monitors displayed footage from inside Redwater, the cafeteria, the yard, the cells, but the timestamps were years old. And on one of the screens, she saw Ethan Cole sitting at a metal table, staring at the camera. But this wasn't live footage. The file was labeled June 18th, 2011. "He's been dead for 14 years, she muttered. Then a voice echoed from behind her. "Not dead. Just recycled." Meyers spun around, gun raised. A man stepped out of the shadows, Captain Rollins, head of Redwater Security. His uniform was clean, but his eyes were distant, like Porter's. "You were never supposed to find this," he said calmly. "What is this place?" "The real prison," he replied. "Redwater's just the front. The state funds rehabilitation. We study containment. You think those men escaped?" "No. We build a place for them outside these walls, mental cages. Their freedom is controlled. Their guilt, managed." "That's insane," she snapped. "You brainwashed them." He smiled faintly. "We gave them what they wanted, safety. Inside a world that will never let them go." Meyers aimed the gun directly at him. "Where's Porter?" Rollins nodded toward the far wall. There, through a glass panel, she saw a small, dimly lit room. Sam Porter sat on a chair, hooked to electrodes, staring blankly at a television looping security footage of Redwater's yard. Every few seconds, he whispered something under his breath. "Better inside." Myers's heart shattered. She rushed forward, slamming the door controls. "Sam, it's me." He looked up slowly, eyes unfocused. "Laura, they said you'd understand. Once you see what's behind the walls." Then the lights in the lab began to flicker. Rollins took a step back. "You shouldn't have opened that door." "What's happening?" He didn't answer. The monitors flashed white, static crackling across every screen. A piercing alarm filled the air. And then, for a split second, she saw something terrifying on one of the screens, a live feed of herself, standing in the lab. Only in the video, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Ethan Cole, watching silently. She spun around, nothing. Just empty air. Rollins was already at the exit, shouting over the alarm. "You're one of them now, Meyers. Once you've seen it, you belong to it." He vanished into the tunnel's darkness. Meyers stumbled to Porter's side, ripping the electrodes from his arms. "We're getting out of here." He looked at her with distant eyes. "You can't escape what's already inside your head." "Sam, please," she begged. "You're free." He smiled faintly, whispering the same words etched into the walls. Freedom isn't real if you can't forget what you've done. And then, silence. The power cut completely. The screens went black. Hours later, when backup teams from the Bureau arrived, they found no sign of the secret facility. The tunnel had collapsed, buried under tons of concrete. The lab, the equipment gone. Detective Meyers was found unconscious near the prison gates, clutching Porter's badge and a single cassette tape labeled Session 19, LM. When she woke in the hospital, she refused to speak. For days, she just stared at the wall, tracing invisible lines with her finger, like she was following something only she could see. Finally, when an agent asked her what happened inside, she whispered one sentence before turning away. "The walls remember us." Epilogue. 3 months later, Redwater Penitentiary was permanently shut down after a series of mysterious electrical fires. The official report blamed outdated wiring. But among the debris, investigators found a single message spray-painted on the main gate. "Better inside." That same week, Laura Meyers checked herself into a private rehabilitation facility under a false name. The intake log lists her as inmate number 74329, Ethan Cole. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, hit subscribe, because the next case will make you question whether freedom is ever truly free.